Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, listeners, welcome, welcome. How's everybody today? And we'll find out in a minute how our international guest, Chris Moore, is. Chris is the president of SD Business Aviation, which is Satcom Direct. Chris, thanks very much for joining us all the way from Florida.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Well, I'm just looking out of my window and I think I probably wish I was with you at the moment.
Yeah, you probably will do, actually. It's pretty nice.
Oh, very good. That's it. That's it. Make me feel great.
Yeah.
Chris, listen, thanks very much for joining us. So as we get into it, can you just please give us a little bit of background as to what SD Business Aviation is, what it does, and what your primary responsibilities are within that organization?
Yeah, sure. So the company was founded in '97, really pioneers in communications. So we first came up with Global One number. People couldn't call or call from the aircraft easily. They had to kind of remember all these complicated satellite codes. So our founder and CEO came up with this concept, and that's how the company was founded. And since then, really, we've been pioneers in making both business and military customers simple communications, reliable, secure, and we also provide software and hardware around that as well. So our primary piece is communications, and then we also do our own routing technology or routers, depending on where you are in the world. Yeah. Satellite terminals, we're just coming out with some new satellite terminals in the next couple of months, which is pretty exciting. So the actual antennas on the aircraft. And then what we actually did a few years ago is launch SD Pro, which is the only software platform which truly integrates everybody's data from the aircraft and from flight operations, and is open architecture, so we can share that customer's data with multiple third parties around the world. So we're number one in our space, just got over 8,000 aircraft on our network, and we're number one in support as well, which is our big kind of value add for our customers. So anywhere in the world, we can put a technician on that aircraft within 6 hours. So, that's kind of our company. It's kind of all about supporting the customer and then innovating for the customers so they have the best experience.
Okay, yeah. Sounds very, very easy and very simple from your perspective. So now, excuse me for trying to break it down a little bit. Now, when you're talking about communications on private aviation, you're talking about the obviously the required with regards to the control towers and across the routes. But what other communication are you talking about?
Well, our communication is predominantly satellite based. So we take satellite communications. We also do data link and some other pieces from the cockpit, but our primary focus is satellite based communication. So we use a number of suppliers in that space to utilize their networks, and then the terminal is actually physically on the aircraft. It's either on the fuselage or on the tail of the aircraft, and then we bring those satellite signals via the satellite provider down to the ground. We then pick them up into our global infrastructure, and then we kind of make the magic happen from there. Okay,
right. Again, so now I just need to break down a little bit further. So for me, just imagine now I've got my own aircraft. Okay, so all right, now what would be the benefits for me?
Well, if it's your own aircraft and you're the owner, I think if we split the benefits up into two sections, one's the crew and the operations, and one's the person paying the bills, right? So the person who turns right on the aircraft, if you look at that, you've got global connectivity. If you look at the world now, I think, especially in the last 12 months, can you imagine if we weren't all connected, being able to do what me and you are doing today? I'm in Florida, you're in the UK. It's pretty amazing that we can do this with technology. Well, we could do this at 40,000 feet as well. So if I was on the aircraft at the moment, we'd be able to do the same call, the same function. And I think for a private owner, really what that is it truly enables them to be globally mobile. You can watch everything from Netflix, Amazon Prime, do a video conferencing call. So you're seamlessly connected. So in the back, what does that mean? Well, if you then have that seamless connection, we all get used to technology. The fact that what we bring is we make sure it's secure. We also make sure it's reliable and it's consistent. And that's really for the owner. That's really the three primary things that we can do above anybody else. For the crew, it's making sure that you can schedule that aircraft around the owner's time. You can maintain that aircraft appropriately so it's safe. And then operationally, you can get from point A to point B with the required amount of information. And again, it's consistent from the fact that it's not like, scheduling a flight with your PA or whoever it is to go and fly on an airline. You can fly anytime you want, but then there's logistics around that as well. So we provide those two elements to that airframe, if you think, the passenger experience, and then it's the crew and the operations experience through that communications.
Okay, so from a bit the business perspective, whereby everybody is saying, how can you endorse paying so much money for private aviation? Actually, you're optimizing executives' time and senior managers' time in the aircraft because they're so accessible. Yeah,
absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding was that private aviation users can actually gain themselves anything from 30 to 50 days additional in a year than on legacy carriers.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
As far as optimizing their time, so not having to be taken out and being on the go all the time. So when people say it's a rich man's folly, it's actually an efficient man's tool.
Yeah, I think if you think of a business aircraft as a time machine, so really what you're doing, you're absolutely right, is you're giving yourself back time. So if you look at like modern aircraft, especially the long range ones, look at something like a G650ER, you can fly from New York to Dubai. You think of that time, like 16 hours or 15 hours, however long that time is, and you're a CEO of an organization. If 10 years ago, you'd be pretty much disconnected. You might have some basic email functionality on that aircraft for that time. But now you can have video calls, you can manage your business. You can also kick back with a cocktail and watch your favorite show or your sports game. So you instantly in that 16 hours, what you've made is qualitative. It's not dead time when you're in that plane anymore. You've made that qualitative experience so that when actually we have some CEOs who, are on our network, they pretty much live on their plane, not because, they like flying everywhere. It's because of that level of productivity, like you said, that they get back by being on it.
Yeah. No, it's incredible, isn't it? And now with the fact that, people are even flying in just to have meetings at FBOs and then fly back out.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, who would have said that 12 months ago? That obviously that's probably happened before, but it's kind of the value of a face-to-face meeting. Everybody, there's been all the things like, video conferencing will replace face-to-face meetings, but I think it's useful to stay connected. But that element of having human interaction is something we all need, especially when you're doing kind of big deals. You need to know who you're doing business with, and just body language and everything else. Also, if it's multicultural, across borders. So yeah, the FBOs have become like the meeting place, or even depending on the restriction requirements on the pandemic, it's somebody's business aircraft. So that's actually the flying boardroom.
Yeah, it's amazing though, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's amazing what you're saying there as well about there is the need for the personal touch and seeing people and seeing what they do and how they respond. I mean, Zoom and all the different team meetings and all the different options are fantastic, but there is that need, especially at the higher levels, to have that face-to-face touch.
No, actually, I think this is just my perspective. A lot of people say that Zoom or WebEx or whatever it is going to replace face-to-face meetings. Actually, I disagree. I think what it will do is stop us depending on email to communicate. Yeah. I think the big thing actually over the last 12 months, I think people have realized the need to do a face-to-face call, use video conferencing, because most people kind of shy away from it a little bit, instead of just typing out an email. And then the need to actually, when you need to go and see somebody, I think people realize that level of human touch that we all need, not only from a business, but also, just personal relationships and everything else. I don't think global travel is going to slow down. Actually, I think it will increase, but also the platforms like Zoom, I think they will be used consistently after it, because people realize that once you're looking at somebody, whether it's on a video call or face-to-face, it's kind of invaluable. Instead of sending 4 lines of email and expecting somebody to, well, I always say to salespeople and people in our organization, people read emails like, in the most negative tone. Usually they think somebody's, having a go at them or whatever it is, or they're not happy. And 90% of the time, if you pick up the phone and call somebody, it's never as bad as an email. So hopefully we'll see that in the world a little bit.
Yeah. No, people need to be a little bit more transparent and also caring. Now, it's funny you mentioned there about the GS650. We just recently did a series of podcasts with 2 astronauts and a captain and one of the other crew members who broke the orbit, taking off, landing the same point, and going over. One more orbit, it's called. It was incredible. But they featured that aircraft, and ironically, one of the things that was a major issue was, having the access and the comms. How important it was, especially going over the 2 poles. It was incredible. Well, it's really good. Really good movie to watch.
Yeah, so in that movie at the start, you actually see a couple of technicians helping set up all the production equipment. They're actually from SD. So we provided the communication support for One More Orbit. So Terry and Hamish, I know them both well, and Catherine, and Yannicka as well. And you remembered Yannicka the most. All right.
I wouldn't say the most, but certainly you wouldn't miss her after you've met her once.
Oh well, it's Catherine from a marketing department with Jane, and they set that all up, and actually went to Abu Dhabi, Qatar. Went to Qatar last year, and we saw the premiere with Qatar executive, who did that, and it was an awesome achievement. Who can think that's just over a year ago, and we're all getting on planes. It was completely and utterly awesome, but it does show how flexible these communication systems are. But also, when they were going up over the poles, obviously with the magnetic variation, that aircraft had both Inmarsat and Iridium on board. Inmarsat for the video broadcasting, Iridium for the safety backup as well, and everything else. They were never not connected, no matter where they went on the planet. And I think that's like where our communications are going. More and more satellites are being launched. I think the opportunity, going back to the start of our conversation, to have that consistency of communications, but also, we can do different things now. Things that you didn't think were possible on a plane 10 years ago are really starting to happen now, which is great.
Absolutely amazing. And that film touched so many points. But now what you just said there about from the satellite communications, which give you that entrance or that gateway into the comms, now you're creating apps, you're building hardware, you're connecting customers through all sorts of packages, and you've got the air to ground connectivity providers. From that perspective, how have you seen things develop, and at what pace?
Yeah, I think more so in the satellite arena, we're seeing that really exponentially change. So more and more satellites being launched. Obviously, we've now got LEO constellations, high-speed constellations, with both OneWeb, Telesat, and Starlink all now coming into the fray, which is going to be interesting. The geo satellite providers, so geo providers like Inmarsat, you know, you've got Viasat, Intelsat, you know, all kind of there as well, and all launching new constellations. There's a large amount of capacity, but all the satellites now, you know, it used to take 6 years to design and launch a satellite. And from one of the providers, they told us they can design and launch a satellite now within 18 months.
Oof.
So, which is, yeah, it's amazing, right? So, and the capacity on those things, we're now talking about putting 25 meg, 50 meg onto a plane, and it'll soon go up to 100. But, you know, when you think of it, 3 or 4 people on board, what does that data do? Well, it'll get to the point of economies of scale. You know, it just enables you to do a lot more. So most people, oh, you know, you won't need that amount of data. I kind of disagree, because all of a sudden now, it's not just the passenger experience. It's what I said at the start. You can now start really, in time, syncing that whole aircraft up. So it's like a flying asset on the digital network, and it's a living, breathing organism. So you're taking all the trend monitoring from the engines, you know, the flight data, you can bring that back, make the thing more efficient with the OEM. And at the same time, the person who, like I said before, who's paying the bills in the back gets the best experience. It's pretty amazing time at the moment.
It is. So with all that technology and the different parameters that you can record on the jet, it's almost like when you look at sports now. And in the old days, someone, you know, a commentator would say, oh, you know, look at George Best, he doesn't seem to do much work. But then all of a sudden, he pops up and scores a few goals, or Pele or whatever. But now they know exactly how many yards they've run. They know whether they're exhausted. They know what's in recovery, all these sort of things. So I'm assuming that's what you're able to do with regard to the aircraft.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, that's a really good point, like aircraft fatigue, right? So how long has the aircraft been in the hangar? So how many sorties does it flew in the last month? What kind of environments has it flown into? Is it flown into an environment where it's kind of highly corrosive? Does it mostly stay in a highly corrosive environment? So you can start putting all these parameters together, and instead of trying to, you know, manage a multi-million-dollar asset on paper and, you know, some really talented engineers, you're giving those engineers more and more information to get to conclusions. Or, you know, the one thing all pilots say is staying ahead of the aircraft. What we're enabling the crew and the operations is to stay ahead of the aircraft and the customer, so that when the customer gets on board to utilize the asset they've purchased, they have the best possible experience. And that's really how we manage our support as well. I mean, our guys in our network operations center have a saying, we know before you know, is they always make sure that they're ahead of the plane, and they're all looking at those data parameters from the flight deck right through to the trends from the satellite, to make sure if they see any anomalies, they can actually get ahead of it, fix it before the customer even knows. And that we're already there with that kind of technology, where, you know, a few years ago that was almost impossible to do.
That's incredible, isn't it? So you can plan maintenance, you can plan whatever you've got to do around also the trends of the customer demand or customer practice or behavior. Yeah,
absolutely. And working with, you know, the one thing we realized, we can't be everything, but what we can be is the backbone of getting that information and that data to whatever providers are out there. So, you know, we partner with CAMP, you know, recent one with MySky. All it is getting that kind of data to the relevant provider, you know, flight docs as well. And we send them the information so they can put it into their system, so it makes their product better as well. And vice versa, they can send information back. So, you know, really what we created with SD Pro is this open architecture. That's our software platform. Open architecture software platform for the industry, where we know as the communications provider, and we have the, you know, router on board, and we have the terminals to take that technology and take that data off, make sure it's secure, and then we're a distribution point for that data on the customer's behalf. It's the customer's information, and they can send it anywhere to whatever provider they want autonomously so that they get the best experience.
That's incredible, isn't it? And what you just said there about, about how you can fit in with somebody else's technology and make theirs better. So I think that's the way things need to move forward. Everybody has got the option to plug and play, but by doing so and by having access to all that data, so many more things can be resolved, so many more things can be planned. If everybody shares it and there's much more of a collaborative approach to that infrastructure, I think it's going to be so much more, I don't know, cost effective, business sustainability, all those issues are going to make the businesses
Absolutely.
together operate so much better.
Yeah, and we're a small community, right? So it's not, we give somebody, so accurate times and cycles of aircraft have been a problem for years. We can have it down to the tenth of the second accurate because we know when the aircraft's powered on, when it's powered off, when it's in flight, when it's not in flight. And instead of depending on the pilot after, again, you get fatigue, right? So you got an aircraft that could have flown 8 hours can now fly 12 hours, and you have to fly additional crew on it. So to take out that accurate times and cycles on the pilots, so that when they land, they just have to do a verification and it's digitally accurate. What you're doing is enabling the pilots to do their job, fly the plane safely, and not have all that paperwork. You've then got the systems around that we send that information off to different providers. Their system improves. Their improvements then improve our system. So it's this ecosystem of, it's not just us improving people's systems, they're improving ours as well.
Yep.
And like you said, it's a sustainability piece and it's a leadership piece that we decided to take, which we just kind of thought, we really need to get the industry out of this kind of, there shouldn't be a reliance on paper. There shouldn't be any paper, it's a digital asset. But more importantly, it's a small community supporting the business aviation and military customer base. So how can we all move forward together? And the only way to do that is being open. We're not proprietary based at all. We play well with pretty much everyone, including our competition. So, it's for us, it's about the customer and making sure that customer has the best experience possible and it's sustainable.
Yeah, no, that's so important. Now, with the fact that data being the new gold or the new oil, and it's so valuable, people, I don't think people actually do realize how valuable it is yet. But what you said there about paperless in most parts of aviation, that this paper problem is still a crazy thing. So many people just cling on to it for various reasons, and there are certain reasons as to why. But somewhere along the lines, there needs to be new standards, new guidelines, new regulations, so that it almost enforces people now, especially with what's happened this year, to look back and get rid of that legacy of waste, get rid of that legacy of blockers and barriers, and start doing things that can make things much more efficient and make everything work more effectively from going green or being more aware to, all the issues of preventive maintenance to, values, etc. And I'm sure with the data that you're talking about, the buying and selling of an aircraft, they would look at that and it's worth a lot of money.
Yeah, well, actually, it's funny you say that. So we had a G4, we just sold it this year. And it was originally built in 1987. It was an awesome plane. We sold it, and it came with 3 pallets of paper. 3 pallets, when you think of it, right? So, and just to transport the paper, I was actually on the delivery flight when we took it to the new owner, and pretty much on board that plane was all the paper. There was a few seats left for us to sit on, and you look at all the paper and you're like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. But you think, obviously, aircraft's well over 30 years old, and you've got all this paper. Well, actually, that should be on a new aircraft, completely digitized. So when it's on its born-on date, comes out of Gulfstream, Bombardier, Dassault, Embraer, whoever it comes out of, that then from its first heartbeat you know, and it transmits data for the first time, that can all be digitally caught. So effectively, you can then, when you sell that aircraft on, and, you know, it's like a car then at that point, you know, it's like Blue Book for cars. Ultimately, all of that pedigree for the aircraft, because that's really where the aircraft's value is. You know, if you lose all that paper, then the aircraft's almost worthless, whereas actually you can digitize that, back it up, so you know that you can't lose a piece of paper that proves you had maintenance 10 years ago to fix something. And it's all there, searchable within seconds. And I think that then proves the pedigree of the plane, but also enables aircraft to be sold more efficiently, which again helps the OEMs, helps the owners, helps keep the value of the aircraft. So if you've got, you know, it's a bit like healthcare in the US, which I'm not going to get into a debate over, but, you know, you've got somebody, you know, who really takes care of themselves, you know, but they're paying a really high premium because you kind of, it's like laws of averages, right? You've got X amount of people in there, but your premium's still high and goes up each year. Doesn't matter how healthy you keep yourself or you don't, because you just, it's just an escalating cost. Whereas, you know, if you can prove that you know, it's well maintained, you know, parked in a hangar, you know, it's not in a corrosive environment, well, then that asset is probably worth more than one that's been parked outside, it's not been looked after properly, hasn't been on engine management programs with Rolls-Royce, you know, whereas we can sync all that data, like Rolls-Royce is a partner as well, and send all of that information to Rolls, so they can tell you your corporate care program, how long you've been on it, you know, the health and state of those engines. They've got all of their systems and analysis behind it. And that's all digitized. So instead of those 3 pallets of paper, you've effectively got that all in the cloud. And it comes with the plane.
Now, do you think that'll come naturally as fast as you'd like to see it come, or do you think it needs some sort of oversight or, you know, regulatory guideline? Or
it needs regulatory guidelines. I think you're always gonna get people who move on that quickly because they see the instant value, and then, you know, one of the biggest things with change is resistance to change, right? Like if you're telling people to change, that's always a difficult thing. I think, you know, for a lot of what we do, we're very ahead of our time. And we see that because usually, you know, we see our competitors' copiers probably 4 or 5 years after we've launched something. They launch it when it's become mainstream. But, you know, we always look at it that you've got to be in the lead, right? So everything we do is future-based, and it's, you know, from our belief is it pulls the industry along in the right direction from supporting the industry with making sure that they've got access to the information they've bought. But I think it will take time. I think like the FAA, you know, YASA, those kind of guys, whoever it is, need to start looking at that because it's your earlier comment, Chris, it becomes sustainable. And all of a sudden the entire industry benefits from it. It's not just people transacting on new aircraft, but the industry grows. And that creates jobs, and it creates innovation as well, which is good.
No, exactly. Now, just to consolidate, you mentioned earlier about MySky. What actually is MySky?
Well, so what we can do is really, they look at spend management, tax reporting, and really the overall cost management of the aircraft. So if you look at that data I've just mentioned before, we manage that and we send that information, customer accepts it, they sign up to a MySky, they're a MySky customer, and we can send them the information so that when it comes to their CIFL reporting, so personal use on plane, tax reporting, cost structure, how much is it, you know, what's the spend profile like over 3 or 4 years, all of those things. Again, instead of us trying to create a tax reporting, spend management system, we went out and had a look in the industry. We saw their product, thought it was great. They're really good guys based out of Switzerland, got along really well. And we send them the information that benefits the customer, benefits MySky, benefits SD. And it's a beautiful thing. You know, we get those things moving. and all of a sudden then that customer gets more accurate spend management on their aircraft to make sure they're getting the best deals. We actually have it in our own flight department, and I think it worked out. We implemented it, worked out some savings on fuel, a few other bits and pieces, and we were saving well over $4,000 a month, you know, just from instantly putting that piece of software in and automating that data. And everything we do, our flight department's really our flying test bed. That's why we have it. We put every product we have in our portfolio through our own flight department and flight test it before we give it to a customer. So we actually see that it actually works and does what it says. So yeah, it's a great partnership. We're really excited about it.
And it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? You know, sometimes everybody, well, not everybody, but too many people think that they need to create their own. But if there's something out there that makes sense and it, you know, it dovetails in with what you're doing yourself or what you need, it's more often than not the best way to go.
Well, yeah, especially we all work in a niche industry as well. As much as we all love business aviation, if you try and be all things to all men, you kind of deviate away from what you're good at, and there's not the economies of scale there to have 20 different spend management systems. So let's get a really good spend management system. It's good to have some competition in there. I know there's some other systems out there, especially in that arena, which is great. And ultimately, you know, we're happy to provide data to them, and you know, it really then becomes a customer choice. But if you look at Microsoft, you know, 20 years ago they were trying to, you know, and Apple did the same thing. They were trying to do absolutely everything, and in the end, what they do now is, you know, if you look at Microsoft Azure, their IoT platform and sending data, it's all about open architecture as well. And you see when those big organizations realize that, you want to encourage entrepreneurial startups who, you know, we think is great. That's how we were founded. You know, our founder used to work for Rockwell Collins, came up with an idea and, you know, offered it to the company. They said no, and he started his own company. So it's, you know, and we've kind of grown from there, right? So, you know, one desk, and now we've got like 400 employees. So we want other companies to do that as well. And if they've got great solutions, then we want to work with them.
Exactly. Now, something else you mentioned earlier about military. So now that obviously puts a different connotation on security of data, etc. So how does that balance up? Because cybersecurity is something that's so important in this day and age, and it's a sad reflection when you think for every 10 good guys or good people out there, you've got a few that are equally as clever, and they're doing it for the other side. So how do you?
Well, we base years of investment. So one thing is, a lot of people say they're kind of in cybersecurity. We're kind of like the leader in it in our space. And the reason why is we took a proactive approach, and we built the infrastructure. So we own our own infrastructure. We don't outsource it. We don't partner with a cybersecurity company. We partner with cybersecurity companies to come in and test our network. Yeah. But we took that infrastructure and actually took the expense and built it in-house. So, you know, if you're a government customer or a business aviation customer, you come across our infrastructure. It's fully owned. You know, we have government customers over it globally, not just US government, but, you know, NATO, governments in Asia. We have those clients, head of state, whoever it is, and we take a proactive approach towards security, reliability, and consistency of the communication. And then we also send all of our clients on that a report each month on how many attempts were made on their network. We can give them that. We had a kind of an interesting case where we had a client flying in just over one of the stands about a year ago. They had a guest on board. They had a full secure network, but the guest had malware on the laptop. We were able to notify them in flight to shut that laptop down, diagnose that it hadn't gone into their network, and proactive management, like I said before, being ahead of the aircraft, because we're able to do that with that data, that consistency, that cybersecurity, to make sure that that customer has no threats within their aircraft. So if you look at it, the one nice thing about business aviation is not all the time do you have a corporation or a single owner on board. Like we said before, they're conducting meetings there,
Yep.
They're moving around, the FBOs have become meeting places. So all this data is moving around, so we need to make sure it's secure. So when you're coming into that aircraft environment, it's as secure technically as it is from a safety point of view when it's in flight.
And that's the challenge. That's what lots of people, obviously with films and now with the way the world is going, as crazy as it's going, you know, it's always on the back of their mind that, you know, if somebody can access or get access into somebody else's system, even if it's being on a private jet, what then happens with the controls of the aircraft itself?
Yeah, and the like two distinct things, right? So you've got the cockpit communications, which is a separated network, and then you've got the cabin communications. And the cockpit's actually extremely secure. It's like a closed network. The cabin's really usually where you get most of the issues with cybersecurity, and most customers don't even know. So, you know, it's really then, if you think of a CEO's laptop and the value of information on their phone and their laptop, really that's what we're talking about, is we make sure that that's extremely secure. We have something called the SD private network. We actually have clients putting their own cages and servers in our infrastructure so that they actually never touch the public internet. The satellite signal goes from the aircraft over the satellite, comes to the ground, we pick it up, and it goes straight into their rack and straight into their corporate network. That's it. They never touch the public network whatsoever.
It's amazing, isn't it? And have you seen a big increase in the number of attempts?
Yeah, actually this year, no more than, you know, it's high, right? You know, so we stop thousands of attempts each month, you know, it's, and that can be from very basic phishing, email, right through to, you know, something more severe. But we send, every customer gets a report monthly, but we haven't really seen an increase because of the pandemic. It's just kind of been consistent, but it does increase each year. So we see like a 5 to 10% increase annually, only on the fact that it seems to be the new thing. I mean, you know, I've spoken to quite a few people this year who they've said that they've seen a lot more phishing emails, you know, where, you know, they can be quite intelligent as well. So it's like, hey, Chris, this is Chris. Forgot to mention, can you go and buy me some Google tokens or whatever it is? And it's that kind of crime that seems to be on the rise. Everybody thinks it's some guy sitting in a room trying to hack something like, you know, War Games with Matthew Broderick in the 80s kind of thing.
Yeah.
Most of it's financial or it's ransom. You know, they want to try and get your data and sell it back to you. It's crazy stuff, but it's happening and it's definitely increasing.
Yeah, my God. It's a nightmare to think what it's going to be like in another 20 years.
Yeah, again, it goes back to then data standards. So I grew up, I'm sure you're the same. So in the UK, you get your national insurance number, right?
Yep.
Over in the US, it's your social security number. Really, as soon as somebody's got that number, they can create havoc in your life. So really, just from a simple point of view on personal data, you've got to look at that. How's that going to change how we get issued, our identification, our government identification for tax purposes, everything else? That all of a sudden, those systems, when you think of it, the national insurance and social security number system has been around for what, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Yeah, I'm sure there's got some level of digitization and computerization around it, but really it's still a number, and you know, you carry it around and give it out, and you know, but as soon as somebody's got that, your name and your date of birth, you know, they can get a credit card. You know, it's kind of, I think the whole kind of personal data piece is going to get increasingly more, not scrutinized, but looked at. And until we modify how we handle that and come up with better processes to safeguard our information, then it's always going to be a prevalent issue.
Biometrics. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So
it's going to have to go that way.
Yeah, and people are going to have to get used to, you know, getting everything with their face, which is going to be different. Now, just to finish on that thought, if you had a magic wand, what 3 things would you like to see happen now that would help the data protection, users, make people want to change and understand why, rather than be told that they must?
Yeah, I just think the big thing for us is, we're doing a lot on education. I think, from a customer's perspective and flight operations perspective, if I had a big wish, was people don't limit themselves. So don't come into things with preconceived notions that it has to be a certain way because it's been that way for a long time. I think the one thing, innovation around aviation, if you think of like in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and now, the one thing the world looks at, and I think we should be proud as an industry, is a lot of innovation comes from aviation. And it really is an innovative marketplace. So if, we're always like, regarding flight, looking at traveling further, supersonic looks like it's coming back, which is great. You've got all of these things and it's an exciting place. Then let's not limit ourselves from expectations on how we can manage that information, utilize that information to forward that technology and the sustainability factor of the industry. I think it's huge, and I think that's instead of having 3 wishes, that's my one big wish, that if we can do that together, I think we'll be in a better spot for the customer and also as an industry.
Exactly. Well, fingers crossed, touch wood, and please God, hopefully that'll all happen sooner rather than later. But listen, it's been really, really enjoyable talking to you and getting to know a little bit more. Obviously, I'm still not an expert in any way or form, but it's an interesting subject, and it's one that I'm sure lots of people will follow very closely. And those that get the chance to travel on private aviation, I think they'll get such a welcome surprise and shock at how much they can do on those flights and why it's so important. So instead of looking at it as just the rich sportsman or the well-off businessman, it's part of the aviation industry, and it's a very significant part, and it's something that needs to be openly looked at as well. So thank you very, very much for your time, Chris. Really appreciate it.
And you, Chris. Thank you.
Cheers.